Here's your host, Wade Lentz and Harrell Smith.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the podcast today. You don't have double vision. There is actually 4 people here because Wade and I are at a conference at Lee Creek Baptist Church called the Preachers of Grace Conference, which is a conference I've hosted for. This is our 10th year. And Wade said, you know what, we got all these mastermind preachers in here, all these great theologians and battle-scarred veterans of the cross. He said, we ought to pull a couple of them in a room and do a podcast. And I said, that'd be great. And then I realized I'm the one with all the podcast stuff that I have to drag down here and set up. So Wade shows up with 3 microphones and 3 headsets, and none of the headsets fit these jacks. So the most untechnical guy in the room is controlling the sound. So anyways, we're in trouble. So, you know, Wade, you know me, Harold. This here's Brandon. Harrell. Brandon is, where do you live at, Brandon? Hendersonville, North Carolina. And this is Eddie Ragsdale. And you are from?
I live in Shirley, Arkansas.
Shirley, Arkansas.
Surely not.
I've heard that a time or two.
Don't call me Shirley. All right. We're going to talk about missions, and we have no agenda. We're just winging it. These guys have not been given a list of questions that they're going to be asked. They have no idea what's coming. But this is the perspective. Wade and I have said many times, we've longtime Southern Baptists that have left, and we do independent Baptist missions, and we've done it a number of ways. I'm currently am a missionary and work with struggling churches. And so, but I know as 14 years of the last church I pastored, we did missions a certain way. So what I'm hoping to do today is Wade can share a little bit about how he does missions. Eddie can talk a little bit about what they're doing. Brandon pastored the same church for 11 years and is now a missionary himself, seeking support. He can talk about what he sees from his background. So we'll just start out with that. Brandon, why don't you tell us exactly what you do?
Well, it's multifaceted. The ministries are called the Russian Bible Society, Global Baptist Missions, and then one of the more familiar sides is Revival Literature. With Revival Literature, it's a publishing company. We publish Christian books. Kind of the central aspect of that are the writings of James A. Stewart. He's a Scottish missionary evangelist who went to be with the Lord in 1975. God used him mightily around the world in revival, and he wrote several books. And so we publish his writings, some that his wife wrote, other Christian authors that understood revival. And obviously the name is Revival Literature. The focus is revival, and then prayer, a lot of emphasis on that and things like that. And then with the Russian Bible Society, we oversee the translation and distribution of scriptures and other Christian literature into the languages of what used to be the Soviet Union, countries of that background. So we do that. And also we've translated some of the books we publish and other Christian books into the languages as well, and had them distributed in the countries. And then with Global Baptist Mission, we have a mission board. It's really just, it's not your typical mission board. A lot of mission boards are kind of trying to take the place of the local church. We're not doing that. We basically just handle the support of the missionaries that are with us. We make sure that they get 100% of everything that comes in to them. We don't take a dime for those services for them, and then just try to help them raise support and anything they need while they're on the field. And so I worked here in the ministries with the former director, Brother Bob Doom, back in 2012 to 2017, about 4.5 years total. And at that time, felt like the Lord, put the ministry in our heart, but just needed to focus on the local church. I pastored there, and so I stepped away in 2017. I became a member of the board of directors for Russian Bible Society in 2018, and then Brother Bob passed away last year with COVID. And as soon as the Lord took him home, he started working in my heart about coming in labor full time with the ministries. And so we resigned the pastorate and have been on the road raising support since April. And it's coming along, but it's big shoes to fill. Our director, Brother Ben Wilkerson, who is actually brother-in-law to Bob. Both of them married daughters of James Stewart. My brother Ben's directing the ministry. He is pastor of Grace Fellowship Baptist Church in Skyland, North Carolina. Actually, it's Arden, North Carolina. That's where we're attending. Intend to join there. And ministries will be under the ministry of that local church.
And good.
We are a handmaid of the local church, but we've got a heart to be a local church ministry. So, yeah, that's where we're at.
That's a good explanation. And Eddie, you're a pastor at First Baptist Church, Marshall, Arkansas. You've made some changes to the way you're doing missions. Why don't you kind of tell us where you've been and what you're at?
All right. So we are currently still at SBC Church officially. However, last year, me and my son went as messengers to Nashville. And I don't want to get into all the politics.
Sure.
Of SBC.
Sure. We're not trying to get you to dog it. We're just want to know.
Everybody already pretty well knows what's going on with that. But we came home and we didn't want to have a knee-jerk reaction. But what we did want to do is be faithful. And basically what we decided as a church was that, you know, the fight in the SBC or whatever was going to go on politically with the SBC wasn't going to be something that Marshall was going to be able to play a big part in one way or the other. But what we could do is be faithful with what God had given us. And so moving into 2022, when we set our budget, we pulled all of our funds from the cooperative program and actually increased a little bit what we were going to do each month, and really looking at what Lee Creek had done. And I think that I called you, Wade, and we talked a little bit about what Harrell does. And I talked to a few other brothers who were doing something like this in their churches. And basically we picked 12 ministries, and some of them are more like local ministries. Some of them are foreign missions. And basically what we said is we want to support all of the range of important ministries that we would have been supporting with the cooperative program. So some of our cooperative program dollars would be supporting theological education. So we wanted some in that realm.
Right.
A majority, we would hope, would be supporting international missions. So the biggest part of what we do is international missions, but then we also have some things that we're doing here in North America, and then even some things that we're doing here in Arkansas. And so basically we picked 12 different ministries. We gave them each a month, and that month it's in our bulletin every week. We mention them from the pulpit every week. We pray for them every week, encourage our people to pray for them, try to give a report about what's going on with that missions agency or ministry or church or whatever it was, and try to support them through prayer and through giving. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Right. Yeah, that's I know that's kind of the Lee Creek, what we did here, but it didn't originate with me. I stole it from Charles Spurgeon. He had 52 ministries. Lee Creek's no New Park Street Chapel, so or no Metropolitan Tabernacle. So we had 12 ministries that we supported. We did once a month. But Spurgeon's Sunday night offerings each week went to a different ministry cause. And I think it's a good way to emphasize missions, but it's not the only way. I mean, obviously, Wade, y'all do it a little different. How do you do it at Barrel?
Yeah, let me just quickly say one of the reasons why we're talking about this today is because of so many pastors and churches are leaving the SBC, and a lot of them have no clue what to do, since they have for years just been giving their money to the cooperative program. And matter of fact, when I talked to our church about leaving the SBC, the first thing they asked, well, how are we going to support missions? And I said, well, the way the Bible, lays it out in the book of Acts, you give your money directly to missionaries, and bypassing the cooperative program that the church was so used to doing. So this is one of the reasons why we're doing this, is to maybe help you pastors out there or church members who are contemplating these changes in your church, and maybe this episode will help make that transition a little bit easier. But we support missionaries personally. We know them. And that was one of the biggest things with me in the SBC, is that there was a great gulf between the missions giver and the missions receiver. And I asked our church, I said, hey, name me one missionary that we support. Not one person in that room could name you one missionary that their money went to. And I said, that's a shame.
Yeah.
You ought to have a relationship with these guys. You ought to know them, and you ought to be able to pray for them specifically, know their needs and so forth. And so by us doing that, it has really increased the motivation of missions, and the giving has increased greatly. And for us, it has been a blessing. It was somewhat of a difficult transition at first, but once we got over that hurdle, the Lord has really, really blessed us.
So what does your funding look like? I mean, you're not doing one a month like Eddie does or like Lee Creek. How do you work
We
that?
do Faith Promise Missions giving. So take it out of 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and 9, where those who give and those who have excess give as they are led by the grace of God to give in that excess that goes directly to missions.
So they're given a designated mission offering, not
Correct.
just putting one check in the plate and y'all taking a percentage out and sending
Right.
it to Little Rock or
Yes.
right.
Yes. Yeah. And it's really worked out great.
And then how do you select missionaries? Do you just, is that divided over missionaries that the church has decided to fund?
We have a missions team, and ever so often we'll get a letter from a missionary who is in need of support, and we will first interview them. And then if we feel led that this missionary is worthy of our support, then we'll bring him before the church and let him share his ministry with the church. And normally the church agrees that we support him.
Good. All right. So as Wade kind of alluded to, a lot of people ask me like, well, if y'all are not contributing to the cooperative program, how are you funding missions? And so that's kind of why I wanted Eddie to talk about what he was doing, Wade, what you're doing. And since Brandon was here, Brandon, tell us just, I don't want dollars and cents, or how does you have three different mission agencies under one umbrella, which is, I think is just a great thing. You've got all of the administration and you're running three organizations out from under it. And that really cuts down on a lot of the needed things, but you are the assistant director, yet you do not receive money from any of these mission agencies, right? Is that correct? You're supported separately. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm actually missionary supported, just like any missionary that would be on the field. There's a few reasons that's been kept separate over the years. One of the things was Brother Doom as well as Brother Stewart just believed that if you're going to really be able to help missionaries, you need to be a missionary.
You're going to have to get closer.
But it also helps as far as it also helps as far as the ministries themselves, because you get into all kind of stuff, IRS and everything else. Who would pay me? Which ministry would do this, which ministry would do that. And then you're worried about your time and things like that. And so it helps for those purposes as well. But also, I feel like it helps me to be equally invested in all of the ministries. Now we pay for the day-to-day stuff. We pay our secretary, who's now my wife, actually. She's left the bank and she's doing that job now. It was Sister Nita Cox for years. She did it. So we pay those positions to make sure those things are taken care of. But yeah, so it helps me to understand, I guess, where missionaries are coming from and what their needs are. And, at one point there, it wasn't a position where the ministries could support a director.
Yeah.
When this ministry first started, Brother Stewart really funded everything that was done through the sale of books. And in years gone by, that's kind of dwindled as far as just even a lot of the people that knew about us died out, And so one thing I've been hoping and praying that the Lord would do is let us reintroduce the ministry to people that don't know and some have forgotten us, to bring those things in. But keeping those things separate, then what's coming into the ministries can go directly to the projects that we have going on with each one. For instance, 2 years ago, we saw the completion of a received text Ukrainian translation. Brother Yuropopchenko in Ukraine, when he got out of high school, realized the need, went to Moscow, trained in Greek and Hebrew. He's a brilliant linguist, and then began to translate the scriptures, because the Ukrainian Bible that was available had never been accepted by the Ukrainian people. They were still using the Russian Bible. And so he'd been plugging along at this for years. And actually, at the time I worked at the ministries, Brother Bob found out about Brother Ura, brought him to the States, interviewed him, found out his philosophy of translation, things like that, started helping him raise money. We were able to help him hire a team of translators. And 2 years ago, the project was completed for the New Testament. And Brother Bob, being missionary, supported. Now, it was a little different. Brother Bob was a missionary already when he came off the field to start directing these ministries. So I'm starting from scratch on that.
Right.
I left the church and I've been raising support, but God's been helping us. And just as far as the way missions are done, I know several that do Faith Promise. What we did at the church was similar to that. But as far as the logistics of it, we did it a little different. We actually, when I went there, we had 3 missionaries. One got 100 a month and 2 got 50 a month. And I said, well, why don't we first order a business? Let's move everybody to 100. Especially nowadays, 50 bucks isn't buying a tank of gas, you know.
Right.
I said, that way it's actually helping them. It's actually making an impact. And then from then on, when we take a missionary on, that'll be the amount, you know. And so the way we kind of just did it, if somebody in the congregation was somewhere and got wind of a missionary that they thought was worthy of support, or if I saw somebody that I felt like the Lord would have us to, I would bring them in. We'd just let them present the ministry and usually have them preach. I don't know if he preach, especially if he's going on the field. And then the next business meeting, that would end up being a new order a new business, you know. And so we took them on like that. When I left the church, I think we had 19 missionaries that were supported monthly, and we'd raised it from 100 by then. And then even individuals in the church would get a burden for a missionary. And so they would take a missionary on personally and funnel that through the church. So it's local church, you know.
Right.
And so that's how we did it. And that's really most of the churches that I've encountered, they're doing something very similar to that.
Right.
The Faith Promise is very common. It's a very good way to give you an idea of where you're at. The church that we'll be at, Grace Fellowship, they do Faith Promise. And so that's kind of how we handled that as well.
And the support you're receiving, I'll just tell you, the support I receive for the work I do usually comes in the form of $100, $150, $200 increments. And those are from individuals. I have one individual sends me 50 a month, and people say, well, you can't live on that. I know, but what happens is you get a number of churches coming together, and they're all sending you 100, 150, 200 a month. That adds up. And the reason it's better to have a bunch of churches sending you small amounts is if that church falls off the map, falls into doctrinal error, whatever, it only affects you at $100 a month if something goes south. Yeah. And so it's better to have a multitude of people. And you see that in 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians 8:9, where Paul instructs them to lay aside. And he says, sure, as I've told the churches in Macedonia to lay aside. And so everybody was putting money together, and it added up to a sum, a larger sum total. This is what happens in the cooperative program in the Southern Baptist Convention, except you're funding entire agencies in there, and they're all taking their little pool out of it. And by the time it gets to the missionary, there's no direct tie, as Wade said, from the missionary back to the church.
If I could interject,
go right ahead.
One of the things that I tried to ensure took place was, number one, we had met the missionary, we'd shaken their hand, we'd heard them preach the gospel. They'd done that among us. And every month when we got a prayer, every Wednesday night, I would spend the first part of our services reading those prayer letters, right, giving out those email addresses, pointing them. And I would encourage our people, you email the missionary. Let them know that you're a member of a church that supports them and that you're praying for them. And it puts their skin in the game. It's not just throwing money at something. You don't know where it's going. You don't know who's doing what. And this way you've got people, you're doctrinally agreeing with, that they're preaching the gospel because you've heard them preach and actually understand it,
Right.
And so that kept them before the people. And let me just say to missionaries out there, send prayer letters.
Yeah.
Keep your churches and those that support you abreast of what you're doing, because it is so critical. If you don't send a prayer letter 2 or 3 months, then they've not read it.
And what you're calling a prayer letter makes up a lot of our New Testament.
Sure.
It's Paul
Absolutely. Yes,
Paul
sir.
sending a report
Yeah. Here's
and
what we're
answering,
doing.
here's what we're doing,
Yep.
here's what's going on. And that should still be going on. And no, it's not inspired. It's not kept in a roll that we preach from, but that's basically what they were doing.
Sure.
Whether you can't tell me that Second and Third John are not prayer letters.
Right.
They're short, they're simplistic. It's, I plan to go here. If so-and-so comes by, you help them. I'll deal with Diotrephes when I get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all he's
Yep.
saying. And so you make a great point, but here's what our conference is geared towards: preachers. It's preachers of grace, but we've turned it kind of into a mission conference in that we try to have 4 or 5 or more missionaries here, so that while we're preaching and fellowshipping, somebody gets up and says, hey, like Cole Dixon did, hey, I'm preparing to go to Turkey this morning. Last night, Danny Thursby gave an update on Grace Bible Theological Seminary. Tonight, you'll give an update and tell us what you're doing to the group. And then Vincent Troxel will do that Saturday. I'll probably give a little update on what I'm doing Saturday. But the whole purpose of this is to introduce people. And while you're here, somebody can sit down with Brandon Harrell and say, hey, what do you believe about this or that, or what's your views? And you can make that connection. We had Josh Wormley here year before last, and that was 2020. That was a COVID year.
Yeah.
It was down.
Yeah.
And Josh met people. Didn't you take Josh on for support?
Yeah. Yeah. We, Josh was our May.
Okay.
We supported Josh in May, and I was able to have a couple of conversations on him with the phone, and was able to present kind of what was going on in their family and in their ministry,
Sure.
to our church. So yeah, that was really good.
Lee Creek took him on because when you hold a missionary's baby and you look at them and you're going, all right, you're going back to Kenya and your dad's going to try to smuggle himself into Somalia to train pastors. We need to make sure your dad has enough money to keep you in diapers, and there's something about holding missionary babies and knowing that, this guy's going to take this kid overseas for the next 3 years. That kind of relationship can only be built one-on-one. And so we supported him. You supported him. Gary Fitzpatrick supports him. The church I'm the interim pastor at has come to know him. They're supporting him. All of that was just through one weekend at a preachers conference.
Right.
And that's just the churches that I know that were here that support him.
Yeah.
And so that's the way it works. That's the way it should work. In my opinion, that's the way it worked in the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
People encountered gospel preachers, heard what they were doing, felt convicted that they need our help, and they knew them. And if you look at the end of Paul's letters, or really any New Testament writer's letters, there's all these greetings. Say hello to Epaphroditus. Say, greet Gaius, my brother. And this level of personal knowledge of what's going on is what I think is absent in a lot of today's mission work.
And that's one thing. I've been part of Free Will Baptist churches, Southern Baptist churches, Independent Baptist churches.
You are my favorite Free Will Baptist preacher.
I've been in all of them, and it's amazing. It seemed like for years the draw for a lot of people to the SBC was the missions program, but that was one of the things that always for me was like, I like this way because you have the personal connection,
Right?
the relationship with the missionaries. I've got missionaries we supported at the church that I still text regularly, call regularly. They're praying for me now, recommending me to churches and things, and because there's a relationship that was established.
A good example of that is that, Eddie, you took a mission trip. You took some of your church members to Utah, correct?
Yep. Just got
Worked
back.
for a church plant there, worked alongside with them. Again, having that personal connection, your church, those who went, know this man and family personally, and makes a difference, does it not?
Yeah.
Just before you get started, someone took Eddie's cloak and tunic too.
They did.
Oh,
They did
my.
do that. Yeah. Mine and my youngest sons and a young woman from our church. And
They got their clothes stolen on a mission trip,
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
weren't
they-
skinny dipping either.
no, they broke into our van in Denver, Colorado, as we were staying in the hotel that night, and they took they went through everybody's bags, but they took all my stuff, and this young woman from our church and my youngest son, they took all of
So
their
we're
stuff.
looking for a guy that looks about your size, one
Yeah.
your son's size, and one the lady from the church.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. I don't know, but yeah, so that church, so for example, the church you're talking about, we work with a church plant in West Haven, Utah, which is kind of a suburb of Ogden, if anybody knows where that is, kind of north of Salt Lake City. But we work with a church plant called Sojourn Church. And Sojourn, very aligned with, what we would believe here, 1689 guys. And we made them our ministry in June, since we knew we were going to be going out there, and we were already picking 12 ministries, and they had kind of been left hanging by NAM because of some of the NAM rules. And so we said, hey, NAM's not going to support them, but we are. Yeah. So we were even able to help them like that, along with going out there and being on mission and working alongside them and seeing what God was doing there in their church. Growing up, ever since I was converted, I've been a Southern Baptist. I've always been a member of Southern Baptist churches. And I was always told, you got to do it this way. This is the most efficient way. The cooperative program is the best mission sending force that has ever existed in the history of humanity, right? And that's all I'd ever been told. And I'll be honest, in this bit of a confession, I just accepted that. Mm-hmm. I didn't really look into it. I just went, well, they're telling me that it's the best thing that's ever happened. And I'm the president of our local ministerial alliance, so that's cross denominations. And in talking to some of those guys, their denominations tell them the same thing. The Assembly of God guys, they say, oh man, we've got the best mission sending. And I said, hey, if their guys are telling them that, how do I know the SBC really is, or the cooperative program? And it probably really is, because we know it's biggest and all that stuff. But bigger isn't always better.
Sure. Right.
And a part of that is, we were talking about knowing these missionaries. Well, you go to the Southern Baptist Convention. So they just had the one in Anaheim, or the one last year in Nashville. Well, you can go to the preachers conference on Monday, and they're gonna have a service that night where they're gonna install all these missionaries, and then the next day they're gonna tell you about it during the session of the business, and you're gonna see all these missionaries that are being ordained, they're being sent out. But here's the thing: how do I know that they are faithful men? Sure. I've got to be trusting the IMB or NAM or whatever entity. And I'll be honest, a lot of those entities have lost trust with many of us in the SBC. Yes. And so I look at that and I say, I don't know if I can trust that those are faithful men. Mm-hmm. They may be. I'm sure that a bunch of them are faithful men. But if we're sending 50 guys to the mission field, if 40 of them are faithful, but we're sending 10 guys that aren't, I mean, you're saying that, well, I need to celebrate that we're sending 10 guys who aren't faithful. And I don't even know that, but I'm just saying we don't know that because we don't know them. Whereas I'm able to look at this list of these 12 things that we're supporting, and I'm like, we know these guys. Yeah. When we know and if they're not faithful, if we find out something we didn't know before, well, we won't support them again next year.
Right.
And you will find out.
Right.
Or there's a church attached to them, like you were saying, where you're going to join this church that you're at. I'm still a member at Lee Creek. If somebody has a problem with me, they can call Joseph Allen. He can take it before the church and they can discipline me.
Accountability. Right. And that's the second thing I was going to say. I think we need more direct connection between, even if we're supporting missionaries through missionary societies. I don't think there's anything wrong with the missionary society. But the missionary society still needs to see itself as serving the local church. Right. We're serving the local church to help them send missionaries, not we send missionaries and churches, you ought to give us money. No. The church is sending the missionaries. The society helps to coordinate some things that churches can't do. But the point is that churches send missionaries. Yeah. And that has really been a big change for me. Just in moving from the mindset of, well, we send our money cooperative program and however many cents of every dollar actually makes it to a missionary or actually makes it to this or that entity. And we know a lot of that's getting ate up in the bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. The other thing that has really struck me about changing to this way of thinking about missionary support is really just seeing how we're able to be directly connected, not just with the missionaries, but as a church thinking about each month, Okay, this is who we're giving to, this is how we're giving, and really thinking about how that we're being faithful in our giving in that sense. And so I just think that so often we've been told just give the cooperative program. And honestly, that's like somebody coming along and saying, hey, I've got a brand new diet, Harold. And here's what it is. You eat pie and barbecue every day. You want on that diet? And we're going to say, well, I want on that diet. Yes, that's the diet. That's the diet. Here's the reason why we want on that is because that's easy. That's what I already want to do.
Yes, right.
And so I think in some ways they've sold the cooperative program as, well, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
It really leads to, we can be lazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We can be
And
lazy.
when you get lazy, other people become kind of sneaky, and you end up in the position where you're in now, where a lot of stuff's going on. People just had no clue,
Right.
So another thing you'll find over time, Eddie, is your people get to know these ministers and ministries. You'll see their giving each month fluctuate based upon how interested or uninterested they are in that particular ministry. And it gives people the flexibility to say, you know what, we're not going to go eat out after church tonight. We're going to send that money to this guy over here this week, kids. And I think that's the way we're called to give. We're called to give sacrificially to the church and to missions. And the way people become serious and sacrificially give is to know exactly who they're giving to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quality, not quantity. I feel like a lot of times as a pastor, I was getting calls weekly. I'm sure I could say weekly and be honest, of missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
An organization in Georgia got my number somewhere, and I was getting a call from a different missionary with one of them every other week. And so as a pastor, I could have had a missionary 2 or 3 times a month if I'd wanted to, but quality over quantity. I would try to look for those who were genuine, who it was clear was doing the work, and then give them enough to make a difference in their lives. A lot of churches I've been around, they want to have 1,000 missionaries at $10 a month. That's nothing. That's not you. You're not doing anything.
Yeah,
you can brag about we have this many missionaries, but what is your money you're giving us to accomplish?
Right.
And I understand not wanting all your eggs in the same basket and things like that, but do enough to make an impact.
Sure.
And support works that are trustworthy. Matter of fact, that same mission board out of Georgia, I found out, and I had fielded several calls with them. I didn't have any liberty to have any of them come, just didn't feel right, and found out that the director of those ministries, he had an affair or some scandal broke out.
Wow.
And so those guys were dropping off that mission board left and right. And I'm like, well, I never had anybody come that I didn't know and hadn't had contact with.
Right.
And so that's one aspect. And
That's
then
just good shepherding.
Yeah. Well, it's just, you have to have your head on a swivel. And then the other thing I would mention, and this is something you're talking about, fluctuations in giving and things like that. When we first started getting serious about missions and really trying to give to missions, we were eating the budget, man. I mean, we were, our general budget was, and so there was I could see a hesitance in the people, and just like in your own budget, you got more going out than you do coming in. You start looking and saying, all right, what do I need to do here? But I noticed a hesitance even in what we'd already had. And we just prayed. And I said, we need to pray because we don't want to go backwards in this. And we took on a couple more. And the next thing I know, man, we can't get rid of it fast enough.
Yeah.
Even like with COVID, the first year COVID hit, our general budget doubled. And it's just the Lord, because people were still faithful. We made up our minds. We've got commitments to these missionaries, COVID or no COVID. We're going to meet those commitments.
Sure.
And God blessed it, and we saw amazing things. We were throwing money left and right. People in the church that needed just trying to get, because we didn't want it piling up.
Mm-hmm.
I've had pastors call and they're like, "Oh man, we're having to drop missionaries, and their mission budget's going down, but their general fund's growing." It's like, you're telling me you got $250,000 sitting in your general budget and you're dropping missionaries?
Right.
No, you don't understand God's heartbeat if that's your mindset.
Yes. Yes.
That is God's heartbeat, is mission.
Well, and it allows us to look at, are the missionaries that we're supporting, do they define missions the same way that we define missions? They define doctrine the same way that we define sound doctrine. So, you know, the majority of the ministries that we're supporting overseas in our international stuff are doing one of two things. If it's really missionary support, if we're really talking about missions, I think that the distinctive factor between missions and evangelism, and there's nothing wrong with evangelism ministries. We need to be doing that too. And we need to be doing that here and there and everywhere. But what makes it missions is that we're going across some kind of boundary, linguistic boundary, cultural boundary, religious boundary, take the gospel to people groups who would not have access otherwise. Mm-hmm. That's what makes it missions. Yeah. When we're talking about overseas, especially. I would even say in Utah. The reason I look at Utah as real missions and not just evangelism in Utah is because we're overcoming boundaries to take the gospel to people who don't have access to the gospel, right, because what they have out there is not the gospel. Mm-hmm. It's the Mormon gospel. Yeah. Yeah. And so that is missions. Well, that means not everybody at the SBC defines missions that way. Sure. But we can look for people who they define missions that way, and that's what they're doing. And I would say that's what Josh Wormley's doing. He's doing that kind of missions ministry. The other kind of missions ministry that we're able to do overseas is training of pastors. Because listen, you can't see the nations discipled if there aren't brothers to shepherd those people, to preach the gospel to them, just like you preached to us a while ago, and to really shepherd them, to really love those people, to have that kind of maternal kind of love for those people that you preached to us just a while ago. I would encourage everybody watching, go to probably Sermon Audio and you can find that sermon
audio / Lee Creek. Look under the Preachers of Grace link. Yeah, I'm sure Pastor Allen will have it up in a couple days.
And that'll be fantastic. It was a good sermon, but I look at that and I say, those are our priorities as a church. Those are our priorities: gospel access and training pastors. Well, we're able to take the funds that we have, that isn't a lot, but we're able to say we're going to put all the funds into people that are doing that work. Mm-hmm. And so, like this month, we're supporting a missionary in South Africa that he and his wife moved down there, and that's what he's doing. He's training pastors. Well, they need pastors in South Africa, and so we're able to support that. So I think a lot of times people just say, well, this agency, they say they're missions. Well, they might be somebody's golf mission. You know, that may be what they are. Yeah. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting real missions.
That's good. Yeah. Man, we've gone for over 30 minutes, Wade.
It's been good. You know, I think you nailed it when you said missions is the very heartbeat of God himself, and how important it is for churches to be mission-minded and to be involved, and really for the pastor to lead into that. And so if a pastor is not mission-minded, then the church where you pastor is not going to be mission-minded. It starts with the pastor leading his people to support missions. And one quick story, we recently had a missionary that we supported for years who passed away in Kenya from cancer. He was sick, and our church 3 different times within a a year span, took up a special love offering. And we wrote letters. We did certain things to try to minister to them in a very difficult time in their life. And we would not have been able to be a blessing to them had we not known them and supported them through the mission is the way we do that now. So the wife just came back from Kenya. She visited our church just recently, and she was just absolutely moved by the support, the love, even in the monetary gifts that we gave, and how that helped them take care of medical bills, funeral costs, all of those things. Our people heard from her firsthand. They were moved. And again, this is just one of the reasons why our church moved more in that direction. And it's been for the ultimate good and for God's glory.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about all this is whether you're supporting through a mission board, we're not anti-mission board, or local church, the main thing is know who you're supporting. I mean, the church that I am the interim pastor at is in the BMA, the Baptist Missionary Association. And they have international missionaries, and you pick one of their missionaries out. Everything you send goes straight to that missionary. There's no cut, there's no middleman. And that kind of freedom to select that I want to support this guy, not that guy, or even their executive committee is funded by direct missionary support. So their executive committee is not taking money out and saying, well, we need, a couple $100,000 to make payroll, and then we'll send the rest on down.
Wow.
And that's, that's the way you're operating, by seeking your own support for the work you're doing, and then the funds of the ministry going here. And so there's not like a right way and a wrong way to do missions, but there's a good way and a better way. And I think that's what we're trying to get across. So if you're in the convention and you're like, I don't know how to do this, man, call one of us, leave a comment on a video, or, send something through Twitter, get in touch with Wade or I. And, if you want to talk to one of these men, get in touch with us. We'll get you in touch with them. But the main thing is take missions serious. I mean, it's a serious thing. It's intentional. It's not just the secretary writes a check once a month and we did missions. It's like Eddie was saying, it's sharing the gospel beyond boundaries. It's intentional work. And we just want to encourage you to do that. Any last words before we wrap up the podcast today?
I just want to say thanks for having me on the Patriot Pastor podcast.
All right.
Likewise.
Hey, you got your own podcast. Why don't you plug that real quick?
It's called the Standing in the Gap podcast. It's just me expounding scripture. That's all I do. Especially when I left the pastorate, I knew that I needed an outlet for that. Not having it week by week right now. I'm doing the Gospel of Matthew. So
Standing in the Gap podcast, and maybe through your faithful prayers and support, Eddie and Quattro will start up the Rural Church.
I was about to say, I
podcast.
probably shouldn't say anything, but might just tease with there's a possibility of the return of the Rural Church podcast.
Hey, we were in
A
this
reunion.
same room about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That's
When
right.
Quattro and Eddie interviewed you and I on something.
Yeah.
That's right. We sure did.
Right. And
So-
from after that podcast, it went downhill, didn't it?
I think it did. Now we're trying to bring it back from the ashes. So anyways, thank you guys for tuning in today. If you've listened this far, I'm sure there's a special crown in heaven for you. When you get there, just mention that you endured this episode, and do think seriously and pray seriously about missions and how to lead your church, or if you're not the leader of the church, how to participate in your church on missions. So I'll thank you two guys for coming. Wade, as usual, we're going to get off here. There's a bunch of people floating around. We're going to go fellowship and probably take a nap before we come back and hear more preaching. So thanks for tuning in today. God bless you.